Hello, my fellow readers. This is I, Dark Symphony 777, with another fanfiction reading. As always, a link to the story will be in the description below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, click on that bell for notifications, and leave a comment in the comment section below on your thoughts of the story. So let's get into it. So the story I am doing a reading of is Mail Call by Pitbull Lady. It is a Foster's Home fanfiction. I actually really like Foster's. I was actually a big fan of it when it was showing on Cartoon Network. Way back when I was a kid, you youngsters will never understand with your silly little one-dimensional shows. So let's get started. It's like 9,000 words. All right. Just one more screw. There. That ought to do it, Frankie Foster said out loud, to no one in particular, as she rotated the Phillips screwdriver clockwise, tightening the last of the screws needed to hold the closet door hinge in place. Just how, or better yet, why, Blue had managed to remove that door from its hinges, and how he lost the hinges afterwards, making it necessary for Frankie to buy new ones, remained a complete mystery to that day. As Frankie was straightened herself up from replacing that last hinge, the front doorbell of the Foster's Home for Imaginary Friend grammar error right there, for Imaginary Friends rang. Glancing at just one of the countless clocks that her grandmother collected, Frankie realized that it was right at 12 noon, the time that the mail carrier usually arrived, so unless she missed her guess, the doorbell signaled the arrival of that day's mail. Just a minute, Frankie called out, as she put the screwdriver in the pocket of her lime green hoodie. I'm on my way! Even as she headed for the door to meet the mailman, she could hear the sounds of many footsteps and tentacles and wings and other means of personal locomotion coming towards her from all directions. The delivery of the mail was just a daily routine that many of the house residents looked forward to in earnest, since this often meant correspondence with now-grown creators or potential adopters, or even just plain old junk mail that gave them some degree of happiness to read and meant that someone on the outside cared if they still breathed or not, even if it was only in the hopes of making a buck or two off them. For Frankie, the delivery of the daily mail was a mixed blessing. She always enjoyed doling out the letters, magazines, and care packages to the imaginary friends, but the mail also inevitably meant the delivery of more bills, and nowadays it seemed the latter far outmaneuvered anything else that the mailman could bring. Opening the door, she could see that this day's delivery was about average in terms of quantity. Smiling, she accepted the double handful of envelopes and packages from the mailman, grateful that there were no certified letters for her to sign. That might indicate that some debt or another had not been paid, or that someone was suing the home, or that something was in some way not right. Like most adults, Frankie had come to dread certified letters, which rarely, if ever, meant anything good. Turning around, she saw that several of the home's imaginary residents were clustered around her, eagerly waiting to see if today's mail had brought anything for them. Must be nice, thought Frankie, to only see the mail as a positive and fun thing, and not have to worry about bringing it more bills or bad news. Okay, everyone, just hold on, I'll see if... Frankie's words were cut off as someone began pushing and shoving through the crowd, gathered around the front of the foyer, prompting grumbles and complaints from those already there. Would you move already? I gotta get to the door! Frankie instantly recognized the high-pitched, half-whine, half-demand as belonging to none other than Blue Regard Cute Kazoo, the same one who caused her to have spent half the morning replacing the door hinges on the coat closet door. Shouldering his way through the crowd of other imaginary friends, many of whom were many times his size, the 2-foot-tall blue blob barged up to Frankie, reaching for the mail she still had in her hands. Give me! I want mine first! No way, Blue, you're gonna have to wait your turn just like everyone else. That is, if there's any mail for you in the first place. Now go back, wait with the others, and if I see something that's got your name on it, hopefully something that's not a court summons... What? Another bill from one of those DVD of the Month clubs, I'll let you know. Blue refused to budge, crossing his stubby arms ostentatiously in front of him. He shook his head and began speaking in that patronizing tone of voice he used when he was trying to take advantage of someone. Frankie. He paused for effect. Frankie. How many times do we have to go through this? He clicked his tongue and shook his head, like a teacher reprimanding a habitual troublemaker in the classroom. How many times do I have to tell you that? Get over there! Frankie's fingers snapped out to point in the direction of the others, who were patiently awaiting their turns. Blue looked aghast at her, his mouth dropping open like a trapdoor. Well, he said in a huff, I can see that this agreement is something we're going to have to work on. Reluctantly, arms still folded in front of him to indicate his impatience, he turned to walk back toward the others as Frankie muttered behind him, Don't have an agreement. She sighed and began sorting through the stack of mail. Bill, junk mail. Okay, Eduardo. See, right here. Got out the large purple horned imaginary friend. Raising his hand, proof as he stepped forward. Ooh, it's a Lina from Nina. He exclaimed with childlike delight as Frankie handed him the letter, postmarked from Los Angeles, California. Nina, in this case, was Nina Valaversa, Eduardo's creator. She kept in contact with him and sent him letters at least once a month. Frankie smiled as she handed Ed the letter. It made her feel good that some creators still like to keep in contact with their imaginary friend, even if they no longer could keep them at home. Frankie continued handing out letters and parcels. Alright, who's next? Let's see. Ooh, that's mine, shouted Blue, again as he rushed forward to try and grab a large envelope from Frankie's hand. Stop it, Blue! I said when and if I see something with your name on it, I'll let you know. Frankie scowled at him. Blue scowled back. But that one's got to be mine. It's bigger than the other one. Frankie looked at the corner of the envelope. Acme Sewing and Needlepoint Supply House was what it said. Oh, I thought she was saying. Sorry, something. Oh, Acme Sewing and Needlepoint Supply House was what it said. Frankie immediately thought Grandma, knowing that her grandmother was quite fond of sewing. But a second look at the address, he shot down the assessment. Sigh, she held up the large envelope. A large, muscular green imaginary friend with one huge eye in the center of his face. Rather shyly stepped forward, quickly grasping the envelope and clutching it to his massive t-shirt covered barrel chest, as though to hide what it was on the front. Sai was still not comfortable with others knowing that he liked to sew. Frankly smiled warmly at him and whispered, It's cool, Sai. Secrets keep with me. And gave him a thumbs up as he stepped away with his catalog in his large envelope. She continued to sort and distribute bill, more bills. What's this? Now that one's gotta be for me. Blue surged forward once again, lunging at the remaining large brown wrapped publication in Frankie's hand, to one which had not related to the pile of bills. Exasperated, Frankly held it out to reach. Blue, I said I will let you know if anything came with your name on it, and I don't see your name on any of these. If you want to pay some bills, you can go right ahead. Blue looked stunned, clearly not believing her. But I want to get some mail too, he whined. It's not fair that everyone gets mail and I don't get any. I know that's got to be a letter from my creator in your hand. Blue, why would Max send you a letter when he comes to visit you every day? Frankie asked, knowing that she would not be receiving an answer that actually made sense. Glancing at the remaining non-bill item in her hand, she added, This isn't a letter anyway. Looks like a magazine of some sort. That's right, that's my magazine. Now hand it over and we can be done with this little charade. Blue extended his hand expectantly. Urgh! Frankie growled, having to restrain herself from physical violence at this point. Just to be sure that the blue blob wasn't actually right for a change, and the magazine or whatever it was didn't actually in fact belong to him, she flipped open the brown paper cover. What Frankie saw inside the brown paper cover nearly made her eyes pop. Her jaw dropped open, and the hand that was still held the multitude of bills automatically flew up to cover her mouth. Seeing her reaction, Blue became that much more determined to get his hands on the magazine. What is it? What is that good? If it's that good, I know it's mine. He began jumping up and down like a Jack Russell Terrier on crack. Jack Russell Terrier on crack? You mean just a Jack Russell? I had a Jack Russell. Those things were hyperactive as balls. So you would need to... I just can't see it. I just cannot see a Jack Russell on crack when they're always on crack. Prompting Frankie to have to regain her composure and hold the thing up over her head in order to keep it out of reach. There was no way she was going to let Blue of all individuals get his hands on that. Stop it, Blue, she yelled. I already told you, you don't have any mail. Now beat it! Nearly bowled over by the force of Frankie's outburst, Blue composed himself and brushed himself off angrily. Well, fine. If that's how you want to play, we'll play. See what happens the next time the mail comes in, and I get my hands on your stuff. See if you get to keep anything people sent you, missy. You like bills? With that, he turned and stormed out of the foyer. Or at least he did as good an impression of storming as it was possible for a 2-foot-tall blue blob to pull out without looking utterly ridiculous. Still ranting about how unfair it was. How Frankie was keeping stuff that didn't belong to her. Yada yada yada. Leaving Frankie standing there in front of the door, still holding that brown wrapped paper magazine. Once Blue was out of sight, Frankie opened it again to make sure she had just seen what she thought she was seeing. Yep, that was right. What she's seen, all right. The title of the magazine said Sports Illustrated Annual Swim... Okay. Annual swimsuit collect. Is this an M-rated story? No, it's a T-rated. Okay. I was like, well, I've heard of certain stories going that way, starting with swimsuit collection, some swimsuit edition. Okay. Frankie had heard of it, of course. Who hadn't? She just never actually seen it, and had never really had any interest in doing so. Looking at the cover, it was easy to understand why the publisher would ship it in a plain brown cover. To have called whatever the model on the cover was wearing a swimsuit would have been a real stretch of the imagination. In fact, it would have been pushing it to have even gotten by with calling it a thong. And and that was the only thing that she was wearing, aside from her outspread hands, of course, strategically covering certain upper portions of her anatomy. Her mouth still open, Frankie turned a few pages, staring in absolute disbelief at the come and get it poses and beyond skimpy wisps of fabrics that someone I know that word, but I can't pronounce it. Enthusiastically had labeled swimwear. She was so stunned as her mind tried to grapple with the thoughts of who had ordered this thing that she almost didn't hear a voice approaching, saying, "Oh, hello, Blue," followed soon by, "Goodbye, Blue." As it got closer, its owner obviously having just encountered the still irate Mr. Kazoo along the way. Nor did Frankie notice the familiar sounds of large sneakers squeaking on the hardwood floor as they got closer. It was not until the same voice addressed her directly that she paid any heed at all. "Hi, Frankie. Say, what's up with Blue today?" queried the tall, weird owner of the squeaky sneakers. "Oh," Frankie looked up startled. "Sorry, Frankie. I didn't mean to startle you. I was just asking if you knew what Blue's problem was. He seemed awfully cranky about something when I met him in the hall just now." It took Frankie a moment to find her voice. Given the circumstances, don't mind him, Wilt. He's just ticked off because he didn't get any mail today, and he's upset that some residents did. He seems to think I'm withholding his mail from him for stupid reason. Wilt shook his head, chuckling. "Now, why doesn't that surprise me?" he asked, then added, "Speaking of the mail, there wouldn't happen to be, magazine in there, was it?" Frankie's mind boggled a bit. No, it can't be. Not him. Not this. "Well," she began hesitantly, "there was a magazine, but..." Before she could complete her response, Wilt curtly exclaimed, "That's it," and without no further ado, he deftly plucked it from her hand with his fingers, smiling pleasantly at her. "Thanks, Frankie, I'll just take this and be on my way." "That's okay. Wait, I just realized, is this story gonna be one gigantic mistake? Masturbation. If that's the route the story's gonna take, I'm going to Space Mountain. I'm ready. My body is ready. Frankie stared at him as if in shock, her jaw hanging open, not unlike that poor closet door that had been just a while ago, before she replaced the missing hinges. Somehow, she managed to find her voice. "You? The thing is yours?" Will looked genuinely puzzled. He glanced briefly at the magazine in question, then at Frankie. Frankie had stared at him as if he'd suddenly grown a second head or something, then back at the magazine. Before answering, yeah, came his response. Frankie arched an eyebrow rather disdainfully at him and crossed her arms. "And I guess you like to read that for the sports articles, right?" She knew that she was being a smartass at this point, but she was still reeling from the revelation that Wilt had actually owned up to having that publication sent at him. Wilt shrugged. "Well, no, actually," he began. "I get it because I like looking at all the really hot..." Oh, that's actually pretty funny. Everyone always says, "No, I read it for the application. I read it for the articles." "I like looking at all the really hot girls lying around on the beach with hardly wearing anything on," he stated. I don't know why that made that funny. Maybe because it's Wilt that said it. Because his character he's like bluntly honest. I don't know, but that made me funny. He stated as matter-of-factly as if describing why he preferred one type of salad dressing over another. Then he added, apparently sensing that his answer was not quite sufficient, "I'm sorry, something wrong?" Yes. The last question catapulted Frankie into a whole new level of incredulity. She sputtered, What wrong? Is there something wrong, Wilt? This stuff is nothing more than softcore porn. Ow, yeah, there's something wrong. I just can't, I mean, I do not believe you, of all people, would buy this stuff. Frankie shook her head to further emphasize her disbelief. Wilt looked at the magazine in his head, rather like a scientist staring at a newly discovered organism and trying to figure out what phylum it belonged to. Then, to further add to Frankie's sense of disbelief, he calmly stated, "I'm sorry, Frankie, but it's not porn." I mean, he's not wrong. He even chuckled a bit, as if to suggest that her notion of that magazine being pornographic was a bit of a joke to him. Besides, he continued, with a gesture indicating Frankie's concerns were a little consequent, they got something on, and they're not doing anything except lying around the beach and stuff. That chuckled again. That's not what you see in porno magazines. Have you read Playboy, Wilt? Have you read Playboy? Have you? Because, some guys really like getting turned on with girls wearing clothes. That is a thing. Then again, some people like getting pissed on. So, take it as you will, Wilt. Frankie could feel her blood beginning to reach a boiling point. Blue's little tantrum had been enough, but this, and from Wilt? Oh, the nerve! Oh, really, she sniped. And just how would you know what's in a porno magazine, mister? Did he just suck his teeth? Oh! Oh! Wilt opened his mouth as if to reply, but then apparently decided to plead the fifth, as it were, avoiding Frankie's glare. Ooh. You have read Playboy. She decided to take a different approach, managing to keep her cool, seeing that the previous attempt didn't work. But Wilt, she began, trying to maintain a calm tone. What about all those women being exploited by these magazine publishers? Don't you feel bad about that? Frankie knew that there was a way to get through to Wilt. It was to take advantage of his overwhelmed sense of guilt. Wilt seemed to consider that aspect for a second, then shrugged again. Nope, not really. I mean, not like anything's making them pose like that. I mean, what, they're getting paid a lot. That's actually true. Do you know how much money porn stars make? Literally? Right now. I know this is off topic, but it doesn't really tangibly relate to this, but there's like a whole big hubbub going on with someone named this lady named Mia Khalifa, and she's trying to get away from porn because guess what? She wants to move on from being known as the Lebanese porn star, and yet most people are like, well, if you're trying to get away from that, why are you still calling yourself your porn name? Just saying. Now, I actually saw a video where someone actually kind of talked about her leaving porn, and someone mentioned just from one specific type of thing, you get paid $12,000. $12,000. Not $1,200. $12,000 for literally one 5-minute scene. I don't know the rates of porn stars. What I have to say is they make a lot of money. Even worse if the women get paid more than the men. I believe the women get paid more than men. But men get paid more often, because I think men, because they can go and stuff, they can keep going and stuff like that. Well, women can't really. There's also paternity stuff. I don't know all the details of pornography. Better yet, I'm just now realizing why am I talking about pornography, and then I realize we're talking about a story involving pornography. If there was one thing that Frankie really hated, it was when Wilt used that slow-talking, patronizing tone that suggested that whoever he was talking to was a complete idiot. In his opinion, it was the same way he talked to Cheese, or Gyu, or more often than not, to Blue. It wasn't so much that tone that she hated, it was the fact that he was now using it to speak to her. Damn if that wasn't the same argument that most men use in defense of porn. Is Frankie feminist in this story? I'm not saying I hate it. I'm just saying, is she? It was just such a shock to hear those words. Those very words comes from the mouth of a guy who she always figured was above that sort of thing, making it difficult for Frankie to even think, let alone speak coherently. I just can't believe that you say something like that. I mean, why would you buy that stuff? You're an imaginary friend, for crying out loud. She wasn't even sure why she added that last part, probably because she's convinced that he doesn't have a dick. I'm sorry, what? But it just seemed like something she would be able to state her case, irrelevant though it might be. She knew perfectly well that many imaginary friends were capable of some prurient instincts that their human counterpart... Okay, so she knew they were packing. The question Frank is probably wondering is, how big is Will's penis? Will looked this way and that, obviously trying to avoid looking Frankie in the eye. As he tried to come up with an answer, it was obvious, despite his efforts to conceal it, that the conversation was making him uncomfortable at this point, and that he too was struggling to maintain his cool. And as if calling upon some inner strength, he took a deep breath and stared her right in the face, leaning closer so she would not miss one word he had to say. That's right, I am an imaginary friend, but here's a newsflash. I am also a guy. He then added, not that you notice, of course, wondering why he felt compelled to say that, even as the words came out of his mouth. Wilt felt a rare sensation, anger rising to the surface like magma in the throat of a volcano. It wasn't something he often dealt with. His temper, and to the best of his recollection, he never lost it with Frankie. But for some reason, her being upset with him over a simple magazine that could be purchased on any magazine rack, which is true, at any supermarket, which is also true, and her implied accusation that he didn't care about women being exploited and used by men just struck a nerve. I mean, granted, there's Playgirl. I only know a Playgirl because of Shawn Michaels. And his friend Triple H will never let him forget that he posed for Playgirl. So if girls are allowed to ogle men, then men are allowed to ogle girls. It's a shame. It's shaming. Not to mention there are bisexuals out there. Like there are women who look oogly at women, same like guys who oogle at men. It's not a new thing. What was I? Oh yeah, her being upset with... Oh yeah, I already read this. Briefly, he considered retaliating with something about those novels that she liked to read. Oh yeah, he knew about those. And what was in them. Oh. However, he realized that if this conversation continued on its current course, things were really going to get out of hand. True. Wales hated to argue with anyone, since the topic of the argument was rarely worth the energy and effort needed to argue about it, and he especially hated the thought of getting into an argument with Frankie. However, he also hated for some uncountable reason to admit that his point of view was actually wrong this time. He decided that the best course of action in this case was simply to walk back away from the discussion. Smart. Frankie was clearly angry about it, and giving her time to cool down and himself time to think seemed preferable to letting this continue on its present track, like most of the time when it came to me and my ex-girlfriend always arguing. With Frankie staring at him, as though dumbstruck by his last words, Wilt quickly averted his gaze and spoke softly, but with what he hoped was enough conviction. I have to go now, if that's okay with you. With no further words, he simply turned and walked off, towards the stairs, carrying his magazine with him. For several seconds, Frankie just stood and stared at him, stunned with profound feeling of what just happened, washing over her. For as long as she'd known Wilt, which was fine for most of her life, she could not recall having snapped at her like that, or having argued it with her about anything. It just wasn't like him to do that. She heard her own voice reply, "Fine, then go on and leave," even though Wilt had already left the foyer, and she could still hear his sneakers squeaking on the stairs. As she stood there, trying to make some sense about what had taken place, that annoying little voice in the back of her mind started nagging. This isn't really about you being all concerned about that magazine exploiting those chicks, isn't it? It's about good old Wilt actually getting pleasure from looking at other women, is it? It's because you aren't one of them, right? I mean, he actually had to remind you that he's a guy. Since you seem to go out of your way to not notice that, don't you? Maybe if you did notice once in a while, he wouldn't have to order magazines with mostly nicked girls in them. Just think, that's the magazine you know about. Who you know what he's gotten hidden up in their locker? Frankie shook her head. No, it's not like that. Why would I want him to notice me? He's not even human. Why should I be jealous of a bunch of floozies who couldn't even spell their own freaking names? Then aloud again, who cares if he stares at a bunch of big, fat, fake silicone? I beg your pardon? Mr. Harriman's voice startled her out of her little private conversation with her inner self. Jumping with a gasp, Frankly turned to see her supervisor, the house's financial director / resident stick in the mud, and painfully you-know-what, standing beside her. Miss Francis, I am certain that you are not being paid to indulge in idle conversation with yourself, especially when you barely begun to scratch the surface of today's chores. I insist that you put a stop to this pointless exercise in frivolity and start to actually earn your paycheck. Do I make myself clear? Rolling her eyes, Frankie sighed. Yeah, I got the point already. Very well then, the dapper rapid imaginary Frank continued, then added, and speaking of silicone, there's a leak around the faucet in the bathtub in room 304. That could use some attention. I suggest that you make that a priority, seeing as how it will no doubt cost us extra when the water bill arrives. You can take care of that whilst you are completing your toilet issue dispensing duties. With that, he turned and hopped away, leaving Frankie to complete our chores, and contemplate both the near argument Wilt and why the whole thing with the magazine had upset her so much in the first place. That damned magazine. Retreating to his room, Wilt was quite relieved to find that none of his 3 roommates were inside. He needed the time alone to think and ponder what the hell had just happened down in the foyer. Despite his normal tendency to blame himself whenever things went wrong, and they couldn't get much more wrong than this, or to readily accept blame from others, even for things he knew he hadn't done, Wilt felt unwilling to accept blame for this. Was it wrong for him to actually enjoy looking at beautiful women? Beautiful human women? He'd been totally honest when he said that he did enjoy that. I thought women appreciated honesty in a guy. So what exactly had gone wrong? But while he couldn't quite let it go of the conviction that he was right, and there was nothing wrong with him or any other guy enjoying the photos in that magazine, he also couldn't help but to think that he handled it all wrong. There must have been something that he could have said or done that could have diffused the situation before it got to the point it did. Why did you have to get so defensive in the first place? That you had to make this stupid comment about being a guy? Like, she should have cared less. Just who were you trying to impress with that, Wilt man? Sitting down on what was now Blue's bed, that had at one time been his, Wilt let out a deep breath that he had been holding inside for what seemed like the duration of his climb upstairs. He glanced down at the object of contention, still clutched in his hand, like a prize. Trying to push the unpleasantness of downstairs out of his mind, he held it up and idly flipped through a few pages, but was unable to clear his thoughts enough to actually take in what was on those pages. He stood up again and placed a few pointless circles around of the room, realizing that he was still too upset, too agitated to actually sit down. His gaze fell upon his trusted old friend, his well-known Spalding basketball, there on the floor by his locker. That's what you need. Good game of hoops to let off some steam. Then you'll actually be better to figure out how to deal with this. Wilt had to agree. That was the best idea he had all morning. Out of the morning when his ideas didn't seem good at all. He always did think best while actually doing something. There were few things that he did better than shoot baskets. He had to admit so himself. Placing the magazine on the bedside table, right next to the alarm clock, he rolled the basketball towards him with his foot, then scooped it up in his hand and headed for the door to go outside. If nothing else, at least some fresh air would help him feel better. A couple hours later, after an especially frenetic afternoon of shooting baskets, trying to beat his own record, Will sat on the basketball counter and pulled on a fresh pair of socks, having finished drying himself off in the shower. Both the game and the shower had helped abate his anger a bit, but it also helped him realize that the anger was not so much resolve, now directed at Frankie, but at himself. He shouldn't have snapped at her, no matter if she was wrong. It had been uncalled for, really. Pulling on his high-top Converse sneakers, he already resolved that he was just going to have to find her and make up for it somehow. Somehow, apologizing just wouldn't cut it. Would it? You apologize all the time, buddy. She's not going to take it seriously, you know. Okay, so that just created a new problem for him to deal with. What to do, couldn't make up for his previous behavior. Gonna have to think on this one, too. Wilt left the bathroom deep in thought as he walked down the hall towards his room. As he neared the door, it opened, and out stepped one of his roommates, Blue. Remembering that Frankie had said something earlier about Blue having been upset at not having any mail, Wilt felt a little bad for the guy, and hoped to cheer him up by at least letting him know that someone cared. "How's it going, Blue? Feeling okay?" he asked. Without even looking at Wilt, Blue just shrugged in a non-committal way, and said, I felt better, I guess, and continued on his way down the hall. "Sorry," called out Wilt. "Hope you feel better. Let me know if I can do anything, if that's okay." Re-entering their room, which was now still unoccupied, other than himself, Wilt took a seat on the bed once again. Trying to cheer Blue up had lifted his spirits a bit, it seemed. Well, lifted him enough that his attention was much more drawn to his magazine. Right where he left it, on the bedside stand, he tried to ignore it, being that it was such a bone of contention, but finally one little inner voice went out. "You paid for the thing, so it's your right to look. Read. It's not your fault that she got a problem with that. Like you said, you're a guy, right?" "Yeah, that's right," Wilt said, to no one in particular, as he reached for the swimsuit edition. Who knows? Maybe he even gets some inspiration out he can make up to Frankie for having acted like an ass earlier. As soon as he got a look at the cover, Wilt let an involuntarily gasp of pure shock. Instead of the lovely and barely clad supermodel he was expecting, there stood up at him a cross-eyed, dopey-looking chick wearing a black body overall, smiling at him with blacked-out teeth, all courtesy of a black marker. Flipping through the pages, Wilt discovered that every single photo of every single model in the magazine had given similar treatments blacked out, bubba teeth. Big geeky glasses here, a large and conspicuous warty nose there, a mustache and a goatee on this one, a gas. That one had been made over to look like Duchess. Da 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 da. I couldn't resist. His surprise quickly turned to disbelief, and from there, his disbelief quickly began to develop into pure, smoldering anger. What kind of no-good, low-down piece of... Wait. Wilt had seen this particular modus operandi before, and on more than one vandalized portrait in the hallways of Foster's. He had to clean up more than a little of it himself, adorning the walls, all thanks to one particular resident. His mind flashing back to what Frankie had said earlier. Don't mind him, Wilt. He's just ticked off because he didn't get any mail today, and he's a little upset that some residents did. Wilt was left with absolutely no doubt whatsoever as to who vandalized his magazine. Someone with both a motive and a history of this sort of thing. That little son of a... Ugh. Normally, Wilt might have let it slide, but given his state of mind already, he just couldn't. Not this time. There was just one straw too many on the spinal column of the proverbial desert beast of Murden. That's a roundabout way of saying camel. And somebody was going to pay for this. Clenching his now rolled-up magazine in hand, teeth grinding, Wilt stood up and stomped toward the door, practically kicking it open, turning his stare down the hallway in the direction of his just departed roommate. I only have one thing to say. Blue's gonna get fucked up. Blue's mind was firmly locked on the raid of the cookie jar in the kitchen as he ambled down the long hallway toward the stairs. The no-mail fiasco of the early afternoon already forgotten, he just almost tasted those oatmeal raisin dice. It was at this moment Blue knew. He fucked up. Whop! Ow! Spinning around his tracks, his hand reaching to rub up his head where something had just whapped him hard. Blue was really quite surprised to see Wilt standing there, glowering at him. He hadn't even heard him approach. Guess that's why they call those sneakers, he thought absently, before getting to the root of the matter. "Hey man, what gives?" Blue shrieked. "What gives? What gives? You tell me what gives, Blue. Just because you didn't get any mail does not give you the right to vandalize someone else's. That is really not okay. Okay?" Okay. For added emphasis, he leaned down and close to Blue's face, gesturing towards him with a rolled-up newspaper, obviously the same one he just used to whap Blue over the head. Blue stared at him in disbelief, a sense of, oh no, here we go again, beginning to seep in around the edges, wondering if he had somehow, not even realized it, made a tall person joke, and Wilt found out about it. Trying to put on his best show of toughness, though, he responded, "I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about." That didn't seem to be what Wilt wanted to hear. However, "Don't play dumb with me, Blue. You knew perfectly well what I'm talking about." This time he poked Blue in the chest with with the end of the rolled up magazine as he pronounced each word. Who says I'm playing? Blue responded, then added a bit more calmly. No, seriously, I do not have any idea what this is about. Really, I don't. If somebody made a tall person joke, it wasn't me this time, I swear. Tall person people joke? You think this is about... Ooh, so... You're gonna stand there and tell me to my face that you don't know anything about this? With that, Wilt flipped open the magazine he was carrying and shoved the badly defaced centerfold right in Blue's face, presenting him with the evidence itself. Blue stared at the centerfold for a moment and then simply replied, Amateurs, he snorted disdainfully. Seeing a lack of befuddlement begin to crawl on Wilt's face, Blue decided to enlighten him. Surely you don't think that I had anything to do with this lousy amateurish hack job, do you? Blue spoke with the air of the world-famous art critic gazing at the latest entry of a community art contest. I mean, look at it. Buck teeth. I mean, come on. Everyone knows that buck teeth are so last month. And look at that so-called excuse for a mustache. Look, look, look. He stuck out the offending image at the back of his hand for emphasis. What kind of wannabe would use a fuzzy little blur like that? I prefer a gently sweeping up curl of a mustache myself. If it's so much more classy than this lousy attempt at portrait reimagining. Pfft. Seriously, Welt, I'm offended that you thought I'd done something this sloppy and unprofessional. You've seen my works before, and you know that the work of Blue Regard QKZU is light years ahead of this stuff in quality. Wilt glanced from Blue to the magazine image. From the magazine image back to Blue, doubts beginning to cross his mind. So, he said, he slowly spoke, Are you telling me that you didn't have anything to do with this? Well, duh, am I speaking Chinese here? That's what I've been trying to tell you. Wilt briefly considered the possibility that Blue might be telling him the truth, that he didn't actually have anything to do with vandalization of the magazine, but Blue did have access to the magazine when no one else was around. So that meant he had no alibi. And despite his claims of that work being amateurish in comparison to his own peltured reimagining, Wilt knew that he was prone to lying. Also, he shoved aside that little tendril of doubt and carried on with his interrogation. Well, I still don't believe you. Blue put his hands on what amounted to hips, as too near his hips as the blue block could have. Fine, who cares? If you believe me or not, so I'm not perfect? Straightening himself back up, Wilt considered his current course of action. But what little tendril of doubt had gotten a firm enough grasp on his conscience that he decided that the best course of action at that moment would be to take no course of action. He still couldn't let the culprit off without a dire warning, though. Alright, Blue, I'm letting you off this time, but it's the last time you're going to get by with something like this. Got that? Just so you know, I'm going to keep my eye on you from now on. With that, he snatched his magazine back from Blue's hand, turned on his heels and walked, or rather stomped away. Here's Blue parting shot behind his back. Oh yeah? Well, I'm letting you know I'm going to keep stuff on you too. So there. With his dire warning issued, Blue rather stomped away, waited until Wilt turned the corner, and when it whimpered, owie, he reached up to rub the going lump atop his head before descending down the stairs. He really needed some cookies now. Why, that lying little sawed-off son of a... He really got off too easy this time. Why, I should just put my foot right up his line. Wilt. Hearing Frankie's voice, Wilt stopped in his tracks, mouth agape. He hadn't realized that he had been talking to himself out loud, or that she was right there, besides the cart with all the toilet paper and bathroom stuff on it, completing our chores, and that she obviously heard every word. Wilt stuttered incoherently, as his brain tried to get himself in gear. Frankie! What I meant was... So how long have you been standing there? That really wasn't quite what he wanted to say, but hey, a little star, wasn't, right? Long enough, came her response. That's a whole new attitude for you. So who exactly deserves to have your foot put right up his line? You know what? She raised her eyebrows at him in a manner that was both amused and concerned at the same time. Will sucked his teeth, most definitely and quite clearly this time, before answering, man, that sneaky little devil, frankly held up her hand, cutting him off. Let me guess, would this sneaky little devil happen to be about, so high, she held her hand about 2 feet from the floor, and Blue, and having an obsession with paddleball by any chance? Wilt nodded, not surprisingly. Yeah, that's him all right. Frankie rolled her eyes and sighed. So what's Mr. Kazoo done this time? Something I'm going to have to clean up, I hope. Frankie knew, though, that she was probably hoping against reality that for that last one to be true, since rarely a day did pass when she didn't have to either clean up or repair, or both, something that Blue had done. No, it's Frankie. It's just... Wilt started to tell her to show her, but then he remembered that magazine. That's what caused you to almost get into an argument with Frankie in the first place. Heck, you did get into an argument with her. Now, was it really worth all that? All at once, Blue's act of vandalism, however spiteful and however denied, seemed distant and meaningless, as Wilt was struck by a reality he had been previously unwilling to accept. He nearly let a magazine, a bunch of paper and ink, come between him and somebody who meant almost as much as him, if not more, than his own creator did. Even if she would have let herself know, with that realization came a second. Maybe Blue had actually done him a favor by defacing those photos, making him realize just what his priorities were, after all. His head dropped to his chest, his throat tightening. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but no words would issue forth. A slight and ever so gentle touch on his good arm caused him to open his eye and look down at his side to where the redhead nurse stood. Hey, look, Wilt, Frankie spoke softly. Don't let him get to you, okay? It's not worth it. Too much of a nice guy for that. And now she's being so nice? I could deal with this better if she was still mad at me. Wilt closed his eyes again, swallowing hard against that lump in his throat. He knew he had to say something. Hopefully that didn't sound totally lame and stupid. Just as he opened his mouth to speak, though, Frankie interrupted him. Wilt, I sort of got something, I need to say. I'm sorry. No, that's okay, Frankie. You don't have to. They both stood and looked at each other awkwardly. Frankie laughed nervously. You can go first, she said, having realized that Wilt obviously had something to say as well. That's okay. You can go first, came his equally nervous reply. Wilt figured that she, at least, probably had a better idea of what she was going to say than he did. Frankie thought for another moment, then said, All right, I guess I'll go first. So, here goes. She sighed. Wilt, I'm really sorry for acting like such a bitch earlier today. Seeing the look of shock on his face, for seeing that he was about to protest her use of that particular word when referring to himself, she held up her hand to stop him, so she could continue. I didn't have any business trying to tell you what you can and cannot look at. I mean, you're an adult. You might be an imaginary friend, but that still doesn't change the fact that you're older than I am. And it was just wrong of me to go off on you like that. I'm really, really sorry. She could feel a little pinprick starting behind her eyelids as she continued. I don't know why, but for some reason, I know this sounds totally dumb, but for some reason, it just bothered me to think of you looking at those girls, Shaking her head slightly, she rubbed the corner of one eye with her finger. It just feels so stupid. Leaning in closer, Will put his hand on her shoulder, reassuringly. Frankie, don't say that. Not stupid. Not by any means. Not even close. Look, if anybody had been stupid, it's me. I should have been more sensitive to how you would have felt about magazines with a bunch of girls in it, and not acted like it was no big deal. When I could see that it was, to you, but even stupider. I'm sorry. Is that a word? Even dumber was that I let something that come between us, as friends. Wolf coughed slightly, as if to clear up any misconceptions that might have been implying that they were something else. He glanced at the magazine, now tucked under his thumping arm. It seemed that now, this object that had once held so much attraction for him seemed like a useless burden. And it wasn't just because of what Blue had done either. Look, Frankie, I want to do something to make this up to you. That's okay, Will continued. In spite of her protest that he really didn't need to do anything for her, that she ought to do something for him. No, I insist, Miss Francis, he joked, doing a fair impression of Mr. Harriman, changing the whole tone of conversation as it elicited a giggle from his companion, at least. Okay, then how about we do something for each other, Frankie offered. That way I guess we can call it even. Now, she pondered out loud, just what can we do? I don't even have a night off for another 3 weeks, and Wilt was rather surprised that she'd even implied that she would consider going out with him again. He was under no illusions that Frankie was comfortable with the notion of actually going out with, as in dating him. He did have an idea, though, that wouldn't involve either having to go anywhere, even if it did mean they have to do a little bit of late night sneaking around. He grinned at her, that old familiar smile. Hey, remember back when we were a kid and had trouble sleeping sometimes? Frankie stopped, trying to remember what he was referring to and figure out what he was getting at. Then he came back to her. Yeah, you and me used to sneak off to that spot up on the roof, overlooking the rest of the town, count stars, trying to see if we could name the constellations and stuff. That's it. We had to be real careful that Mr. H didn't find out too. Wilt hesitated a moment, not sure if this was the right way to approach a question or not, then kept on. Well, I was just thinking, maybe we could, maybe bring some hot chocolate and some popcorn or something. Maybe we could go up there again. If that's okay with you. Well, Frankie answered, it is still pretty cold at night, and we can bring a blanket. You wanna, I guess. Will could feel the moment slipping away. Maybe this has been a really stupid thing to suggest after all. It could be a date, I guessed. He winced his own so wrong choice of words. Or not a date. I'm sorry, I guess I'm not making much sense, am I? Frankie laughed out loud, having to put her hand behind her mouth to keep from attracting any unwanted attention. Will glanced nervously down the hall, just in case anyone was listening in on their conversation. As so badly as it seemed to be going. Not date, huh? That's a new one on me. Leaning in, conspirator-like, she finally gave him a definite answer. No, it'd be sort of fun to sneak around like a bit like old cotton butt, wouldn't it? Like old times again. How does 11:30 sound? Anybody else ought to be in bed by then. I can bring the hot chocolate and the popcorn and... So, it's on then. It's okay with you, Will could hardly believe that what he was hearing. I said I was going to bring the popcorn and the hot chocolate, so duh. Okay, yeah, right. Sorry, I guess I could bring the, blanket then, right? The blanket. For our first ever official not a date, Frankie laughed, leaning forward to give him a hug to seal the deal. As she did, though, a small white and black cylindrical object fell out of her hoodie pocket and clattered to the floor. Oh, I'll get that, Wilt offered, but Frankie quickly moved her foot to cover up the object before he can really get a good look at it. That's okay, Wilt. Don't bother. I can get it, really. Oh, would you look at the time? She added, glancing at her watch. I really gotta be finishing up with these bathrooms, if you don't mind. Otherwise, I'll still be pushing this cart when 11:30 gets here. Wilt stood up straight. Was that what I thought it was that fell out of her hood? He dismissed the thought from his mind, though. Nah, even if it was, it still doesn't mean anything. Just a coincidence. He decided to at least offer to help her complete her chores, but Frankie insisted that she could handle it better herself. So Wilt agreed to leave her, not wishing to impose on anything. With a newly recovered jaunt to his step, he turned and walked off down the hall, leaving Frankie with the supply cot. As soon as he was out of her sight, Frankie let out a sigh of relief. Moving her foot, she bent down to pick up the black Sharpie marker that had fallen out of her pocket. Held it up briefly as if to contemplate its existence, with a wry, enigmatic little smile and a cock of the eyebrow, quickly put it back in her pocket before turning back to her chores. After another bend in the labyrinthine hallway, Wilt noticed a small trash bucket sitting by the door. He looked at the rolled-up magazine still tucked up his arm. It wasn't much use of it to him now, was it? While he still didn't comprehend just why it had caused Frankie so much distress, beyond the exploiting women argument, which only seemed to scratch the surface, he knew that it really didn't matter. Why? What mattered was he should have accepted her feelings in the first place. Oh well, there was only one place for things like that. With no further ado, he dropped it right in the small trash bag and continued on his way, whistling happy as he walked. This is turning out to be a pretty good day after all. A pair of hands had lifted the rolled-up magazine out what had been intended as his final resting place, having to struggle to do so owing to the fact that the owner of those hands was barely bigger than the magazine itself. As the two hands managed to unfurl the publication to open it up, a single large eye, situated atop what amounted to little more of a bristly, grain stick figure, opened wide with amazement, and a grin began to take shape somewhere lower down the stick's body. Well, what have we here? Talk about one bacha hoochie ma. Oh man, take a look at that setup. Ahem, a familiar voice, making the very distinct point of clearing his throat, resonating just a few feet behind him, causing him to jump. Whirring around, there, just a few feet away, stood a pink squirrel-like imaginary friends. wearing a cutesy pink bow at the top of her head. She did not look pleased. The short green stick figure stared at her a moment, then responded, "What?" Scowling, the pink squirrel friend seemed to contemplate the nails on one hand, held up in front of her face. "Don't play dumb with me. You know perfectly well what." Deep voice that seemed totally out of sync with his appearance. The green stick figure tried to say something in his own defense. Holding up the Sports Illustrated Annual Collection Swimsuit Edition, he replied as nonchalantly as he could in the circumstances. "Oh, you mean this old thing? Baby, you know I only read this for the Sparked articles." "Yeah, right," snapped the squirrel friend, who turned to stalk away, her nose in the air. The little green stick figure friend watched her after a moment, as though considering what his options were. Then, with a frown and with obvious reluctance, put the magazine back in the trash can where he found it and turned to follow her, mumbling, "Women's. Can't live with them, and you can't shoot them." That's mail call. I don't know what to make of the ending. I'm guessing maybe like it's a reference to Happy. I don't know what this epilogue is. I don't know, but everything before that was actually well done. It's a humor romance. It has plenty of humor. It has the romance aspect, more of the underlining thing, like Frankie's upset with Welt, not because of the swimsuit, because she's jealous that he's looking at other women and not her. And so I like the pacing. The characters were spot on. It's a simple plot. Has kind of more of a misunderstanding. The little joke with Blue was pretty well done. I really like everything that's done with the story. The only thing I would get rid of is just the epilogue. Mainly because, what is the point of this epilogue? Just to do the whole, I only read it for the articles joke. That would be my only explanation. But I really liked everything about the story. The setup, a lot of their jokes were well done. The characters, Wilt and Frankie and them, kind of going through this little rush patch in their friendship and saying, we're going to, let's try and be friends and maybe something more. The whole, how everything was placed together so perfectly. Like I said, the only thing I didn't like was that ending because it just made no sense. It just appeared out of nowhere. And I think maybe, I don't know, maybe if I knew what they were, maybe I might get it. But I'm gonna guess maybe Happy Tree Friends. Maybe. I don't know. If I had to rate this on a scale of 1 to 5, I would actually give this a 5. Even with the ending, even with the little epilogue, the story was that good. I have to give it a 5. Everything is just well done. I thank you, Pitbull Lady. I think you're the author who sent. I think you're the person who sent me this. I don't know. Someone recommended me this story, but I have to say this is a really well done story. It honestly needs more reviews. Like, it really needs more reviews. But honestly, I love the story as it is. That's all I asked for. So this has been Dark Symphony 777, and cut.